Hello, it's Duncan at the Redundancy Club with another one of my sort of series of films in trying to get redundancy counselling and career coaching into the hands of people who need it most when they need it most. And this film I'm calling The Power of Owning Your Imperative, and maybe controversially, in other words, the power of growing up. So what do I mean by that? So as anybody who's watched any of my other films will know, I had a very painful journey to my purpose in life. My purpose, my calling, I say that in a non-Lutheran sense, my calling being the work I was born to do. So it wasn't a very straightforward journey in the first part of my life, because from the age of approximately 16 to the age of 32, I had 35 different jobs. So that was things like dishwashing and bar work and being a bouncer on a nightclub door and working as a waiter in an Italian restaurant and, all kinds of part-time jobs that I used to do alongside my permanent work. But all told, things like assistant professional golfer at a golf club, Royal Marines Commando, retail manager for a prestige sports brand, owned my own fashion franchise for a little while. I was a golf and corporate sales executive for a 5-star golf resort and spa. Many different jobs, including something as obscure as a Royal Marines Commando. I was joined when I was 17 and flunked out 4 months later with broken legs, and took a long time to pick myself up from that kind of what I regarded at the time as being a complete disaster, as a 17-year-old who regarded himself as having failed. But anyway, it took me a long time to tune in to my purpose in life. But since I've been a career guidance practitioner and I've grown into delivering executive coaching, purpose coaching, talent management consultancy, I've written for the BBC, created career development toolkits and workshop carousels for blue chip firms like Vodafone. I created a back to work program for a world leading organisation in London called Haringey Action Group on Alcohol, HAGA. The Kinesis program was my design. Throughout that time, have to admit to struggling to make what I am so passionate about relevant to more people. Now, a big part of that is there are so few people in their calling. So as a result of so few people really having enjoying incredibly fulfilling and meaningful and purposeful work, because less than 10% of the population seem to have that luxury. People are pretty jaded, and people get pretty cross with me when I evangelize about my journey to discovering my calling. So throughout this time, in terms of marketing my work, hence the career dovetail model, the career dovetail formula that I created back in schools and colleges in the 90s, it was a very important step. So the career dovetail model is, raise self-awareness on the one hand and labour market awareness on the other, and dovetail the two hemispheres together, and you'll create your epiphany. That had to evolve. So this is my talent triangles, which actually has evolved into the purpose pyramid and is subsequently being printed up as a game of 1,000 cards to help somebody unlock their occupational DNA and zero in on their purpose in life. And that's, hopefully, watch this space, that's soon to be launched. But the formula is quite powerful. So being a person at school who wasn't very good at maths or physics, I loved physics, I didn't love maths. My physics master, for those who remember him or are watching this, the inimitable Mr. Hindmarsh, showed me this little triangle for working out speed. So if you take distance, time by times distance gives you speed. And you could reverse engineer speed. If you didn't have one of the other commodities, you could say if you didn't have time, you could divide speed by distance and that would give you time. Really simple memory jogger, mnemonic perhaps, for helping us remember. So I then I aggregated some information, some really, really useful insights. I'm looking for his book on my bookshelf here. And a guy called Tim Roth wrote a book called The Clifton StrengthsFinder, at least 20 years ago, and it's into its goodness only knows how many iterations it's now. But he mentioned that a little formula for me, which is a skill plus an interest gives us a strength. So let me write that in. A skill plus an interest gives us a strength. So I built on that model, and over the years I've been able to aggregate and distill and make it more of a precise, formulaic, rigorous, repeatable language. And it goes on, a strength plus a behavior gives us our capabilities. Now, this might be a little bit meaningless to you at the moment, but what I'm trying to demonstrate is that there's some rigor to be able to work out what we're going to do with our life. So a capability plus our knowledge gives us our competency, to use HR organizational language. I'm going to come back to that. The competency plus our values is what generates our motivation. Our motivation, coupled with our personality traits, is what generates our attitude. And our attitude, just like a plane wing, is what gives us lift. So our attitude, and this is the little tricky bit, coupled with a business strategy, our work world is what generates value, our contribution to society. So this is the only sort of the anomaly here in the language, is that this is the business, what we're doing for work, for the organization, for society. Now I also draw in here my 3 heart chakras, which I talk about elsewhere. Our head, gut and heart work chakras, which I discuss in another film. But what I want to try and just portray, the reason I want to try and help you trigger the ownership of your imperative, is it's a little bit of a story. So prior to this piece here, so this starts to occur around about our 14th birthday. So back over here, we're born, we've got the first 5 years of our life where we aggregate a large part of our personality and our vocabulary, which kind of starts to define who we are. We are sponges of knowledge and information that we develop. Between the ages of about 6 and 14, we evolve and develop obviously much, much further. We're starting to go to school more and more. We're starting to learn more. We're starting to absorb information from our environment and our surroundings. And we're starting to develop some tastes and some preferences and some interests. It just so happens that a lot of policy starts talking about a young person being on the cusp of adulthood on their 14th birthday. So let's just start this around about then. So into our secondary school, into our high school education, and we start to further develop and further hone our skills and our preferences, our work style, our learning style comes to the fore, and we start maybe dismissing and discarding things that we don't really like so much, which is partly one of the reasons I'm not very comfortable with our national curriculum the way it stands. That's a story for another day. And then we're on this bridge to adulthood. So this youthhood bridge, as we further evolve and aggregate our individuality, we individuate, we start to maybe even start the fledgling steps of self-actualization. So this model would kind of fit with the Maslowian hierarchy as well, which you can research yourself. But then we get along here and we start to think about what we're capable of in life. So how do our behaviors influence our learning? What are we capable of? What can we do? What can we contribute? And our interests, with our education and having been examined on our interests, along here they've evolved into knowledges, so they're nouns. So all of these, the reason my card game is so exciting for me is because, I can attach a specific order, grammatical law, to this equation. So for example, a skill is a verb, an interest is a noun, a strength is an adjective. And all of that coherent language works really, really well in defining who we are, which is why I'm really excited I've cracked the code of the meaning of life. So this was a bit of a pivotal moment for me here. So I've had a few eureka moments in the last few years since I've been working on this. This is my life's work, this talent triangle here, this purpose pyramid which it's set to become. But then I got along here and I couldn't come up with a grammatical law for competency. So I looked up, all I could get it down to was the way that a verb interacts with a knowledge. So for example, conceptual thinking inspires fellowship for leaders, designs buildings. So when I looked up what a two-word sentence is, the internet gave me the answer, which was this is called an imperative. So an imperative is a trigger point in our life. Because once we know our imperative, and you'll recognize this from some of my films elsewhere, we kind of got a beacon on the horizon, which we could call purpose. We could call a whole raft of different words, and but the semantics of it is that once we trigger our imperative and we know what we're good at, we know what knowledge is, what interests us most and where our passions really, really lie, then we start to melt the semantic fog, which I argue is what locks so many people into mundane, drudgery, slogging work that they just don't enjoy. But let's not be elitist about this, because I saw a film on the BBC News, the 6 o'clock news, where they gave the freedom of the City of London to a street cleaner who hadn't missed a day's work in 40 years and had pushed his barrow along the pavements. You could eat your lunch off his pavements. He was so proud of sweeping them clean. He could set your watch by his routine. It was such a ritual for him. And he would call in on, for example, singleton female shopkeepers and make sure that they were safe. And everybody in the community loved him. And he was so proud of his career. Equally, I have this thing about, neurosurgeons who can sew a couple of capillaries inside of a brain and produce a leak-free suture line on two brain blood vessels, and the amount of dexterity and finesse of talent required to achieve that is phenomenal. So these people exude a charisma. They contribute to the knit of society. Now we could go up through the model, but that's probably another film. But this point here, where we accept acknowledge our vocabulary that I've talked about in other films, that we develop we do our self-inventory, we understand ourselves, we start to appreciate ourselves. But there's a big part of this is to do with ownership. We dispense with the noise and the distractions of all of these other jobs and all these other things that we thought we were going to do. We have to discipline ourselves. We have to make some sacrifices. We have to control ourselves. We can't live in denial. We've got to take responsibility for what we're going to do and what we're going to contribute. And the beauty of achieving that is when we interview, when we go for interview, we radiate positive energy. We radiate the law of attraction. We've overcome adversity. We've defined ourselves. Hence, I talk about it as, in other words, it's growing up. So the question is, are you grown up? Have you taken responsibility for working through this process? It's difficult to do. You know, I'm unashamedly marketing in parallel my coaching services, my purpose coaching services. But there's a way to doing this. There's books. There's, you know, we talked about What Colours Your Parachute is a great book for helping you formulate this thinking and develop this strategy. So good luck. It's a great process that you're now involved in, and I'm sure you'll come out the other side much stronger for it. Thank you.